So, I just got back earlier this evening from our expedition to Ninaistako, or Chief Mountain. This was the finale of our Learning from Place course in Ghana Studies for the summer of 2012. And it was my second climb of this mountain, and I think about my fourth time taking some excursion into the backcountry here. And I thought, rather than try to wade through typing out any of my perspectives on what went on and what went through my mind while I was out there, I thought I would just quickly make a video and put up some of the pictures that I took along the way, or that I had taken for me, like this image. So we had planned to go to Ninaistako from the very beginning of this course, which was 2 months ago, and started preparing the students for it. The idea was that we'd actually spend 3 days and 2 nights in the backcountry. And the first day we would climb the mountain proper and camp out somewhere below, either directly below the mountain or at Slide Lake, which you can see behind me to the south, or my right hand side in this image. And then the next day we would climb up the valley, up the Slide Lake Valley, to a ruin site, which John Many Chiefs had introduced at some point to Alvin Many Chiefs, who introduced it to me before our falling out. But in any case, it turned out to be just a single overnight expedition, and although there was a lot of interest before we hit the trailhead, I mean, in the few days before going into the expedition, I had several emails and a number of people saying that they were going to join us, and I had a lot of student interest. When it came right down to it, I think we had 8 students, which was maybe half of the class. Maybe a little bit less than half of the class actually showed up for the event. There were 16 of us, or no, 18 of us in all that went out there, and most of us were either staff and auxiliary people that had kind of tagged on because they'd heard we were coming out, or family members of staff. And so we made our way out to the mountain. Actually, this has been the most successful trip out here in terms of Ghana studies that we've had yet. It's intimidating, and I don't know if it was the weather that threw people off. We were supposed to have a very sunny day, and as you can see from this photo, it stopped being sunny. In fact, it was very cold and threatening with snow and rain. So we started off, and I stole this image from Narcissus, who posted it on Facebook a little bit back. Start off toward Chief Mountain, and this mountain is really it has a big role in all of our lives. It's kind of a symbol of identity. I mean, if you live here, this is the prominent, it sticks out so far from the other mountains, and it's so prominent that as soon as, if you've been away for a little while, as soon as you come back into the region, you see this mountain, then you feel at home. It also plays a role in a number of stories, including some of the really old, very important stories like Boakski, the story of Scarface, um, the story of the flood with Napi. There's actually an origin story of Ninaistako that has to do with a kind of a sorcerer's battle between Asokanaki and Naatosi, the sun. This time around, I actually wasn't looking forward to the expedition over the couple of months that I had to prepare for it. I mean, I brought it up as a possibility. I suggested it. I love being in the backcountry. I love carrying my means on my back and hiking out into what is really wilderness. I mean, if there's anywhere in North America that there's wilderness, it's in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. I love going out there and living out there, even if it's for a few days. It really gives me a lot of perspective on life in general. The things that we take for granted. This mountain is really in our backyard. Everybody who lives around here, we can see this mountain. We see it every day, and like I said, it's such a piece of our identity. And yet, relatively few. I'm not going to say few, because few, you think of maybe a dozen, couple dozen, but I know there have been hundreds of people that have come out here that are around now. Hundreds of people. And some people come out here every year. There's groups of people that come out here every year. There's groups of people who are still coming out onto the mountain to fast. To seek spiritual guidance. I've only ever come out here just for the ordeal of climbing the mountain, just for the experience of living out here for a few nights, sleeping out here, in a place where it's pretty wild. I mean, there's bears. On our way in, we saw a bear crossing the road in front of our vehicle. A black bear, not too far from where we hit the trailhead, which is pictured here. There's bears, there's cougars, there's real predators out here. Predators to us. And the environment, I mean, though, from the looks of this image, it looks like a pretty easygoing environment, but it is so harsh. It's really hard to explain to somebody who hasn't strapped their means of life onto their back and hiked up into here. It's really hard to explain to someone exactly how harsh these conditions out here are, but it really is. And as you can see here, as we started on the trailhead, it was really windy. It got to be pretty bad. It got to be threatening to pour rain, to thunder, to snow. It was cold. None of us had dressed for the conditions that we were about to encounter. And that's the thing about the mountains, things can change really easily. And I love that. I was prepared for it. I had in my pack, I had everything I need to survive out here for a week or more, at the very least. I mean, I'm pretty good with plants. I actually had a little cord in my pack that I can use for trapping. Um, I'm guessing I could live out here a good while, actually. But I was prepared to live just off the stuff in my pack for at least a week. And I figured that's the safe way to go. But like I said, I wasn't really excited about it until a few days before the expedition. Before that, what was going on in my mind was I was really not wanting to leave the house, not for the comforts of home, but because I have attachments. I have attachments to my wife. I have attachments to my birds, both the wild birds that are here that I've befriended, and I meet every day, ritualistically in the morning, and my birds that live in my house, my magpie Derek, my crow Kira. And I don't like to be away from them, even just overnight. But as we came toward the day of the actual day that we were going to set out for the mountain, I was getting psyched up. I can't help it. I really, really love being outside. And it just so happened the morning before I left, and I left fairly early, Kira got up. Kira's my crow, and she's a crow that I saved, that I rescued. She'd been hit by a car. Her wing is so damaged she'll never fly again. And she pulled a feather out of that wing, the damaged wing, the morning I took off, and dropped it in a place that's kind of unusual for her. And I picked it up and I brought it with me. And I had a few different thoughts going on in my mind about it, but any case, I'll talk more about that. But I took a little rubber band and I attached this feather to my hat. I wore a kind of a ball cap out there, and it was so windy that when we first started off on the trailhead here, her feather ended up becoming detached and flying off, and luckily somebody picked it up, and I had to put it in my fanny pack and carry it in there for the rest of the expedition. So we started off across this landscape, and we're looking at this from the northeast side of the mountain. This is the way we hike in, and we hike around this north end of the mountain up to this west side, and this west side is kind of a ridge, and this ridge is what we end up climbing. It used to be a full mountain range. You can see here, you can see all this fallen rock. This is all rock that has fallen off of this mountain. And in fact, while we were out there, there's rock falling off the mountain. It's this rock falling every day. But it used to be kind of a range, and it's extended back. This is the next one back along that range. You can see this one. There's another little one out here, and then get into the middle of the mountains proper. This is what it looks like when you're on the west side of the mountain. And this prominent little point here different people have different names for it. Some people call it Ninaki, um, the chief woman, and the little one that's behind this that you don't really see in this picture, people call it Papoose. Um, but this is more kind of a, you know, Western mainstream names that have been attached to these: Chief Mountain, the chief woman, and the baby, and the papoose. Um, my in-law, Sakoichi Taki Richard, was out there with us. He's one of the students in the class, and the name that he knows for this peak that's shown here is Soatsis, um, tail feathers, and so I thought that went rather well with the feather that I carried from Kira, my crow. And in a way, what this feather became for me when we were hiking out there was kind of the way to feel less homesick for my birds, more attached to them. And I kind of got this feeling like Kira had sent me with this feather for a reason. Like maybe if the feather traveled to these places, she'd be able to virtually somehow travel to these places. Crows are known for this. In Blackfoot tradition, in the songs, it talks about it. They sit on the top of the mountain and they can see with the sun's eyes. They can see all over Blackfoot territory. Um, and in fact, Ninaistako Chief Mountain is, it's really associated with crows. It's a place where the origin of Ninaistako, the thunder pipes, came from, and there was a battle between the crows and the thunder at this place, and the crows won. And in fact, going up there this time around, that was very prominent in my mind, because we faced thick clouds where it looked like we were going to have some serious rain, some thunderstorms. We already had some serious wind, and all of this was part of the story, the origin story of Ninaistako. And I remember the crows saying about the wind being their medicine, and this didn't threaten them, and so I didn't really let it threaten me either. It looked pretty grim as we were hiking in, especially for the few of us who had come prepared to spend the night. And that's another thing. We had, like I said, we had planned for spending a couple nights out here and doing some real backcountry hiking, but there was very few who came prepared to do that. So we hiked in, and it's really tough terrain. Pictures don't say enough about it. But if you look at this photo here, from where I'm standing taking this photo, to get up to that Soatsis, that tail feathers peak there, that's at least an hour walking over all kinds of rubble and scree, and pretty tough terrain. And if you're carrying 60 or 70 pounds on your back and going up and down a hill, and this is already high altitude, it's pretty tough. And it's hard to prepare anybody for this, nonetheless to prepare students for this. So as we hiked along, we ended up getting pretty spread out. The people that were kind of in the shape, in the physical shape to do this, ended up getting quite a lead on those who were more struggling. And that's the way it's been every time I've come up here. When I've come up with a group, it's very hard to stay together as a cohesive group um, with, just to wait for those who are struggling when you only have a limited amount of daylight hours to get around to the back, and it's not a fast thing. It's about 4 hours to get around the side, just to get around the side of the mountain before you climb it. And we had students who were going to try to get up, down, and back to the vehicles before dark, and we started off at about noon. So they didn't have that much time. So we ended up spreading out to the point where probably from end to end, our group was stretching a mile along the trail, and the trail became less and less descript to get around to the back of the mountain. This is just another shot of that, what used to be a mountain range, and is now kind of a pile of rubble sticking out from the main edge of the Rocky Mountains there. Lots of scree and lots of erosion. And this is, you follow this ridge to get up the backside of Chief Mountain. So this is when I'm already on my way up the side of the mountain. It's this time around it was more difficult than I remembered it being the other time that I actually climbed the mountain. The way I remembered it, you climb this long, steep slope of scree, and then there was maybe 10 feet of rock climbing, then a little platform, then maybe another 10 feet of rock climbing, and then from there you could walk up onto the mountaintop. But this time around there was a lot more rock climbing. There's been a lot of erosion. I think the last time I actually climbed up was 8 years ago. It's been a lot more erosion since then. And there were some scary places, and there was people that stopped before the peak because of being intimidated by the rock. And maybe they were smart in doing so, but for some reason I couldn't let myself stop, and so eventually I did reach the top of the mountain. And this is the top. This is me sitting at the top, and again I have Kira's feather. The whole time I was out here, I was thinking about my birds. So, yeah, this is the top of the mountain, and actually, Richard Sakoistitaki, who I mentioned earlier, the guy who knew the name Soatsis for the smaller mountain, he had gotten up here already and was on his way down, and I met him. I was the second up to the top, and he was trying to get in and out pretty quick. He wasn't prepared to stay the night. And in fact, the last time he'd come up to this mountain, he had been forced to stay the night because he got a late start. And he just had to sleep in some grass, and was freezing and lost in the forest. And so he didn't have, he had a little bit of trauma associated with this place. At the same time, he was happy to go up here again, and he wanted to get up and down quick so that he could get back to his vehicle before dark, because that was what had screwed him up before. So I was the second one up here. I got up here and up to the top, and was waiting for students to kind of follow my lead. A lot of them had followed Richard's lead, which was, he took a different route than I did. I take the I just kind of follow the slope of the northern end of the mountain and climb up that way. Richard goes south and then cuts into a particular crevice and climbs up through that crevice. But anyway, got up here and was doing my thing. One of the first things I saw when I was up here was this rainbow. And I don't have, I'm not anyone who associates rainbows with any particular meaning or whatever. Well, I do associate it with meanings, but it's not a flowery kind of a meaning. I associate it with Napi, and Napi's genitalia, the trickster. I'm not a rainbow warrior, but this was kind of a neat scene because I'm up here on the platform. This platform that's pictured right here is where I believe Biloxi, where I believe Scarface fasted, one of the places. I also believe that this is where Napi himself was with the animals. Of course, it was a much bigger mountaintop at that time, but he was up here with the animals when this place flooded, and he sent down animals to get the earth. He eventually, the earth was brought up by Misopsky, the muskrat. But what kind of blew me away was I was above this rainbow, and it's just an amazing view. The image, of course, can't betray the kind of wind force that I was under up here. And you can see, from a distance, the mountain looks pretty stable, and it looks like it's got a, the top, it looks like it's got a large platform top, and actually the top is broken up. It's all like this, just little pieces of platform that you have to navigate around and crawl down crevices and up to the next platform and this and that. But this particular platform here has always been something, since the first time I saw it, has most impressed me. I've been all the way across the top of the mountain, and this is the most impressive spot. And to me, it's most impressive because of the rock itself. The rock has kind of this green sheen coating on it, and from a little distance, it doesn't quite look this green. It looks orange, but like if you see it from here, it kind of looks orange. Look up closely, it looks green. But what most impresses me is it looks like water too. And going across the whole top of Ninaistako, the whole top of the mountain, it's the only place that looks like this. The only place that has this kind of rippled water effect, that has this sheen of whatever that mineral buildup is on it. To me, it reminds me of Napi and the flood, and I think about this as when I see it, it's kind of like the first rock. I mean, this is the rock, the only rock in the world above water at one time. Um, so to me, this is a really special place. I was sitting up there, and actually, I got a good phone signal up there, so I sent a few pictures out onto Facebook and such. And I thought, um, I was starting to think that none of the other students were going to make it up. And then after about 15-20 minutes, then Miles came around the bend, and he made it up. And then maybe 10 minutes after Miles made it up, then Joey, he made it up. And so it was nice. The three of us were up there. We were waiting for a fourth. There was a fourth one coming up, but he never showed. And so the three of us enjoyed being at the top of Ninaistako for a while. And it was really cold. It was snow cold. Our hands were freezing, going numb. There was so much wind. It was almost scary that we'd get blown off the mountain. But off to the side of this platform, there was enough of a windbreak that we could kind of take it easy. So when we got too cold and nobody else had come yet, we decided to go back down. And we went back down. We have to descend some of the cliffs that we rock climbed to get up there. And at the base of those cliffs, we ran into our other a group of some of our other students. This is Debbie Blackwater, and she's showing me her gloves in this image. She had bought these gloves brand new for the climb out here, and they were now fingerless gloves. That was how hard she worked to try to get to the top. There was 4 students who got up to the base of the cliffs and were trying to find their way up to the top. I had gone ahead of them. They'd seen where I'd started climbing and that, and they followed after me, but the rock was really intimidating. Even I was intimidated. It was far more treacherous than I remember it being, or at least it appeared treacherous. In reality, it really wasn't that dangerous. But yeah, they ended up waiting, and when we came down off the mountain, they were there to greet us. And so this is Debbie and her gloves. What had become of them? And by this time it was toward the end of the day. They had maybe 3 hours of daylight left, and they had not packed to stay the night. So their crew, Albert Blackwater and Debbie Blackwater and Jimmy Bighead and others, they need to head back right away so that they didn't end up like Richard was last time and find themselves in the forest at night and needing to just bed down without any gear. So they headed down. In the meantime, I brought Miles, because we were going to stay the night out here. We weren't in any rush. And I brought Miles over to examine a cave that I'd seen on my way up. On my way up, while I was rock climbing, I found this cave, and there was a small opening to the cave, but it looked like inside it opened quite larger. And I was intimidated to go into there myself while I was alone climbing, but with Miles along, I decided to go in there. We could see there was snow inside the cave, and in that snow it looked like what were cougar tracks. And so in this image, I'm actually in the large chamber of the cave, and this little bit of daylight that you see out here is the crevice that I crawled through to get into the cave, and kind of had to just go on my belly. I had my headlamp on, which is why you see this illumination here. This is illumination for my headlamp. It's not the cave is not normally lit this much. And I had my headlamp, and I had a hunting knife in my hand, and I was ready to run into cougars. And as it turned out, the marks that we could see on the snow in there were not cougar tracks, but places where the water was dripping down between the rocks. For the most part, the roof was pretty stable looking, but there was this one large crack along the roof where water was dripping down, and there had been rocks falling down and this kind of a thing. So anyway, I came in to check it out because you never know what you're going to find. It is Ninaistako, and I half expected to find pictographs or petroglyphs detailing some of the stories that I mentioned, but I didn't find that. This would be a really good place if you wanted to sleep up here and fast for 4 days. This cave might be a really good place to do that. And it's quite large, this cavern, and quite deep. This is me looking up at Miles, looking down into the cavern at me. And I climbed up this hole to get out of the cave. So anyway, that was a little bit of adventure to add to the end of our climb of Ninaistako, and then we went down to our base camp, which is just below the mountain. We found a nice little flat with a lot of dead wood that we can make a good fire with water close at hand from some of the glaciers that were melting. And we're in a nice bed here of glacier lilies, actually. This earth you see here that doesn't have the green on it is that way because it's been recently snow covered by glaciers. And these flowers you see off to the side here, actually they're the glacier lilies. So I collected a bunch of glacier lilies, well, a few anyway, while we were up there to eat. But yeah, we got back to camp, and it had been quite the day. We were worn out. So it was Miles and Joe, myself, Dion, and Damien, and we all stayed down at this base camp and spent the night. So it was cold, it was hard ground. Weren't too intimidated at this point about bears. We were just so worn out. Our bodies were so worn out. Weren't too worried about it. And woke up. Actually, when I woke up, the boys, Miles and Joe, had already got up earlier in the morning, packed up and left. They had an agenda. They need to get out of there. So myself and Dion, we were left out there, and we started our way back. and I stopped um, to refill water. Actually, I should say too that we were joined by Clayton King. Um, I didn't mention that, but after Miles and Joe and I came off the top of the mountain, and after we checked out the cave, we passed Clayton King, who's another one of the students, well, an older student, who was on his way up the mountain, and Clayton slept up there, slept up on the top of the mountain for the night, and that's quite something. So he came down in the morning before we packed up, and he joined us for the walk back. And I don't have any pictures of Clayton, but it's quite something. So we stopped at our water source and filled up our water. And again, I'm still clinging to Kira's feather, and started making our way back. Um, it's relatively easier going back down off Chief Mountain than coming up. Obviously, um, you run into obstacles like there's a few boulder fields where the mountain has been collapsing. There's a kind of a mud flats. I did get a bunch of extra water to bring home with me to drink, so I have some Chief Mountain water to drink, some real, natural water that's coming off of the glaciers, untreated, I should say. Not that any water is unnatural, but this is not chemically treated, not filtered by anything but the earth around Ninaistako. And eventually got back out toward the vehicles, and that's where I took this final image of the mountain from the other side of the forests, um, from where we had parked our start off point. So when we got in the vehicles, the first thing I noticed was the padded seat was so comfortable. Um, the padding. I'd been sitting on the ground and sleeping on the hard ground, and the padding was something else. It seemed like a lot of the others that were with me were really craving fast food. I think Clayton said he was going to go see if he can get some red wieners in Browning. I think Darian was talking about A&W or something. I haven't touched fast food since January, and I wasn't craving it at all. And in the past, when I'd come up here, I had been really craving fast food. I was glad this time around that wasn't something that I wanted coming down. But a couple of things that struck me about the whole ordeal. For one thing, I didn't think I was going to do as well as I was able to do this time around. Previous hikes back up here, I've been stiff as a board the next day. Either I climb to the top of the mountain, my legs are like jelly. It turns out, to my surprise, that I'm more fit this time around than I have been on any of my 3 other past occasions hiking back in here. So that was one thing. The fitness surprise. Being out there, though, what struck me was it was so beautiful out there. It was so nice. Just there, hiking out and finding a place where you want to sleep and sleeping, and the potentialities for all kinds of plant gathering and different kind of trapping and hunting and this kind of a thing. One of the thoughts that occurred to me was that I would like to do something like a week long gunna study session where we do nothing but take off into the back country, and we're gone for that week. And this is the conflicting issue, because I'd like to do this, but at the same time I don't want to be away from home. I don't want to be away from my birds. Um, so it's a battle for me. I suppose my birds will survive and be happy with Mahoney while I'm gone, if I have to go for a week. But I think it's good for people to come out here. It's good for people to take on this challenge. I get concerned for the people that try to make it up the mountain and then don't make it all the way up. I wonder what that might do to people's psyche. At the same time, I'm glad when people recognize any limitation they might have, so they don't hurt themselves, because we don't have insurance or anything like that. And so when people stop because they know that's as far as they can go, they've still done a lot. It's really, really rough terrain. It's really, really tough to even get to the backside of this mountain, nonetheless start climbing it. And so overall, for the whole group that went, I think it was very successful. I know there were a few that were kind of upset that they weren't able to get to the top, and that I attribute mostly to their not having prepared to spend the night, because it's really what one should do if they're going to go out to Chief Mountain and try to climb up and down it. Should be prepared to spend the night. It's too much to try to get into the mountain, around the back of it, up, down, and back through the forests and such. It's too much to do in one day. So give yourself a couple of days. Do an overnight, and it makes it very doable. So that was one thing, the fitness aspect of the whole thing. I wish I was more fit. As I was walking, one of the things I was thinking, because my pack is pretty heavy, and my legs were, they were resisting at first, and then after maybe the first hour, then they opened up, and after that it was no problem. But it's physically demanding. It's physically demanding in a different way than sports. People have come up here that play sports a lot, and they don't have the kind of muscles and stamina that's required to be comfortable in the backcountry. It's a different kind. And the only way to train for it is to walk around with a really heavy backpack. One of the things it reminded me of, as I was hiking, was when I was a kid and I was infatuated with special forces, and I talked to special forces guys and wrote them letters and this kind of thing. And one of the trainings that they did all the time was they would carry a rucksack with a bunch of heavy rocks in it, and I think they call it the FH or HFR or something like that, the heavy fucking rock in their backpack, and that's how they would train. And I was thinking while I was out here, if I had to do it again, I would train, for a month leading into it, just hiking around with my pack all the time to get myself really, really used to walking with my big pack. I walk with my camera pack quite a bit, but it's got a different kind of load and a different kind of feeling than my backcountry pack. So the fitness aspect, and it reminded me that people in the past, and we talked about this, a bunch of us, as we were going out there. People in the past, at the beats and at the peaks, must have been really, really physically fit, to be able to hike around on narrow trails, carrying everything they owned, moving from place to place. In these kind of terrains, any kind of terrains, wearing moccasins, it's just unbelievable. So I have a lot of respect for those people from the past. And then the other thing that going out here always reminds me of is how kind of fictive our civilized lives are. And as I drove back from the mountain back into the so-called civilized, not wild domestic world, it's really quite a departure. It's really quite a separation between these two realities. And to me, I think the civilized reality is scarier in so many ways than being out here in the bush. I mean, there may be a couple of predators out here, but there's a whole lot, including mental, psychological predators, especially in amongst the matrix of our human society. So yeah, driving back home after being out here, even just one night, is something. And I believe that, as a final note, I believe that going out and going into the backcountry or some real wilderness area, just going out, spending even a night, but imagine spending more than that. Imagine spending a week, a month, or whatever. It does something to you. It makes you aware of perspectives you wouldn't otherwise have. If you don't allow yourself to go back home right away, to go back and sleep in your soft bed, watch your TV, eat your junk food or whatever, if you're out here in the backcountry, it changes you. Even a little stay will change you significantly, and a longer stay will I would imagine completely transform you. I have had longer stays, out in wilderness areas, week-long stays, these kind of things, and it does transform you. And it's hard to explain in what ways, but you have a perspective, I think, that other people who aren't willing to do this willing to leave their comforts for even a few days will never have. And you can see the division between our sociocultural reality and nature much more clearly after you've spent some time out here. So, those are the things that I wanted to say. I still have Kira's feather. I thought about putting it up there in the mountain so that by connection for her, maybe she could fly there in some manner. So I kind of think it's part of why she gave me her feather. Part was for protection, perhaps, and part was so that she could travel. So we did that. And I didn't leave her feather up there. I brought it back down, and I plan to keep it and use it on similar excursions in the future. So that was my trip. Hope you enjoy the photos.